This week, we're going to be talking about hormone hierarchy. This is something that needs to be addressed when we're looking at our hormone balance. In today's episode, we're starting the new series all about hormones. And I want to begin with something that surprises a lot of people. Most women think that their hormone problems start with estrogen or progesterone, or of course, the thyroid. But in reality, those hormones are actually much lower in the hierarchy. The hormone system has a chain of command, and at the very top of that chain is your nervous system and your ability to respond to the stress. If cortisol and your stress signaling are unstable, everything underneath it starts to wobble. That includes your thyroid, your metabolism, your blood sugar, your sex hormones. And this is why so many people and women feel like they're chasing symptoms without getting real answers. They try to fix their estrogen, they try to fix their thyroid, they try different diets, and they overexercise, but the upstream signals controlling all of these hormones have never really been addressed. Today, I want to walk you through what I call the hormone hierarchy, because once you understand how hormones actually interact, it becomes much easier to know where to focus. And often the answer is not where people expect. Understanding the hormone hierarchy, you got to think about the hormones like a company's organizational chart. At the top is the leadership that sets the direction. Below that are departments that respond to those signals. In the body, the hierarchy generally looks like this. First is the nervous system. Second is the cortisol and the stress response. Third is blood sugar and insulin. Fourth is thyroid hormones and metabolic rate. And then finally, we get to sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Most people jump straight to the bottom of that list and don't address the things at the top. They think their problem is estrogen imbalance or low progesterone, and those things might be true, but they're not going to get corrected unless you start from the top. So those hormones are responding to signals coming from higher up. So if you are dealing with the things on the bottom, but not the ones at the top, that's all chaotic, then the rest of the system is going to have a hard time adapting. What stress actually means to the body is the thing that we think about the most, that emotional stress, that work stress, family stress, life stress. But the body doesn't really know the difference. It experiences stress in many different ways. It can be undereating, it could be overeating, it can be overexercising. You might become lethargic and you might not be moving much at all. It will cause blood sugar swings. It can contribute to poor sleep, tons of inflammation, and cause gut dysfunction as well as nutrient deficiencies. Those two in particular are things that I see a ton in my practice. I think I work on that kind of stuff a lot in my practice, and it is something that people need to address to kind of overcome all of their symptoms. Even something simple like drinking coffee on an empty stomach every morning can create a stress signal in your body. That caffeine can trigger that stress response. For some, it's sometimes worse for some people more than others, but your brain and your nervous system are constantly scanning the environment, asking this one basic question. Are we safe? Do we have resources? That's what it needs to know. It is also checking to see, are you in survival mode? And that is where most people live and don't even know it. So when the brain perceives threat or instability of some kind, it activates the sympathetic nervous system. That is your fight or flight response. You have all been there before. Cortisol and adrenaline increase, your blood sugar rises, your energy gets redirected away from repair and maintenance into survival mode. And this response is incredibly helpful in short bursts. But the problem is that in this modern day society, we're chronically running away from that saber-toothed tiger, and that we stay in this fight or flight state nonstop. And that is where our hormones start to become regularly imbalanced. What chronic stress does to the hormones, this is what it looks like. When your body is in that chronic fight or flight, several things start to happen. First, your cortisol rhythms become disrupted. That you might feel like extreme stress and anxiety. It might feel like lows in the afternoon. It might look like waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back to sleep. Other people might develop sort of a flattened cortisol pattern where you are sort of flatlined all day. You don't have that nice spike in the morning and then slowly come down at night. And your body struggles to respond to stress in an appropriate way. Secondly, blood sugar becomes unstable. I see this all the time in my CGM program. Cortisol increases glucose release from your liver. And over time, that can contribute to insulin resistance. But so many people may not look like they have a blood sugar problem. But on labs, if we're doing the right kind of lab testing, you can see where someone is starting to have some insulin resistance pop up. Now, third, this is something that I talk about a lot in all of my programs and with my people almost every single day is the thyroid. When you are bogged down by that stress response, you are having a slowing down of the thyroid signaling. We talked about all of that in the thyroid series, so go check that out if you haven't already. But when the body perceives this chronic stress, it conserves your energy. And one way it does this is by reducing your metabolic rate, which will show up as low T3 levels, that active thyroid hormone. You may even have higher reverse T3 levels, and that's just a sign there's too much stress or too much T4 medication. You're going to have low thyroid symptoms even when labs look normal, right? Lastly, you can end up with those sex hormones becoming disrupted. And it's super common starting in the 30s, often after childbirth and that kind of thing. Your progesterone levels will drop off first. Progesterone is our nice, calming, anti-anxiety hormone. And when you lose that kind of hormone and it drops first because you're chronically stressed, you will have an increase in anxiety symptoms and probably maybe will have been recommended that you take anti-anxiety medications. Another thing that happens is that when the progesterone drops, your estrogen, even if it is normal levels, can appear or you have symptoms of estrogen dominance. This is when your cycles become irregular. This is where you have that anxiety, poor sleep, mood swings start appearing. And this is why addressing stress physiology is often the first step in restoring hormonal balance. Recently, I had someone reaching out to me because they have tons of anxiety and stress. They are starting that perimenopausal process and they wanted to get a jump on it to figure out how we can balance things out the best we can before we get into menopause and full-fledged menopause. This is really important to do. Let's talk about what symptoms of dysregulated stress response might look like. Many women I work with describe very similar patterns. They feel wired but tired. They crash in the afternoon around 2 to 3 p.m. They wake up at 3 in the morning with their mind racing. They cannot get back to sleep, and they feel anxious and overwhelmed on a regular basis, no matter what is going on. And they think that life just seems just not very manageable, even though they can say other people have it worse, or this is just kind of normal life stuff. It becomes very frustrating and it becomes defeating. And you start to think that you're somehow a failure in doing life because you feel terrible with how you're showing up in your life. The other thing that happens with this is fat loss becomes extremely difficult in this state of chaos. That is something I'm doing a course. If you're local to me, or if you want to join virtually, I'm doing a class on a workshop on March 26th and March 30th. March 30th is in person, where we're going to be talking about fat loss for women over 35 years old. If you're 34, you can come if you want, but it would be really important to show up so we can show you how you can recalibrate your body and help your body do what it's supposed to do and finally get into those fat stores. But it becomes very difficult if your body is tired and wired and stressed and you feel like you're running away from that saber-tooth tiger. That is really hard for fat loss to come into play. You also might notice things like hair thinning, digestive problems, increased inflammation. These symptoms are often signs that nervous system and your cortisol rhythms are not functioning optimally. The body is essentially stuck in a protective mode. It's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to keep you alive. You just need to get out of its way so you can let it do its thing. It's a healing process that won't occur if you're chronically in this state. So your body perceives this threat. That's where your body's going to live, in that fight or flight state. Where do we start? The good news is that supporting the stress response does not require extreme interventions. It often starts with very basic physiological signals that tell the body it's safe. and it can just do what it's supposed to do naturally. One of the most powerful signals is regular nourishment in any way, shape, or form that looks like. It could be years of skipping meals, intermittent fasting, being out or eating diets that leave out major food groups. That chronic undereating can push the body deeper into stress physiology. Prioritizing protein at breakfast is another important step. This is often the first step when I'm working with people, depending on how they're eating, is to really get that protein in the morning to help stabilize blood sugar and reduce cortisol spikes early in the day. Set the day up right. And getting sunlight in your eyes in the morning helps with your circadian rhythms. It helps get that morning cortisol surge going in the right direction so that you're setting, again, your day up to be in the right direction. If you live in a place in the northern latitudes where it's dark so many months out of the year, when you get up in the morning, you can buy happy lights and things like that to help with this process, make it a part of your routine. Gentle movement like walking can regulate the nervous system. You don't have to be running a marathon to have some health benefit. You can just walk. That is going to be very good for regulating your nervous system. But make sure that you're getting adequate calories. I'm speaking to so many women who are chronically undereating and their body is in survival mode just for that. It is critical for your metabolic stability. And these foundational signals help the brain perceive that the environment is safe and energy is available. So when that happens, hormone signaling becomes much more stable and you can start to heal. If you take one thing away from today's episode, let it be this. Before trying to fix individual hormones, we have to stabilize the system that controls them. That's the nervous system and the stress response. They set the tone for everything that follows. So in the next episode of the series, we're going to talk about the hormone that sits directly underneath cortisol in that hierarchy. That's going to be insulin. So we'll break down why blood sugar stability is absolutely key, critical, essential for energy, metabolism, and hormone balance. If this episode is helpful, make sure to follow along so you don't miss the rest of the hormone series. And if you know someone who constantly feels exhausted but cannot figure out why, share this episode with them. Because often the missing piece is understanding how the body's stress system is affecting everything else. I'll see you in the next episode. Have a great day.